Welcome to the Wellspring Counseling Podcast. My name is Jonathan Kittle. We are glad that you are here. Wellspring Counseling is a group private practice in Greenville, South Carolina, a team of counselors. And this podcast is a show where we get together and we talk about typical problems that counseling clients face and the solutions that bring help. Today, I'm really excited to share a conversation I had with you with one of our counselors, Davy Brenniger. Davy has a master's degree in counseling from Wake Forest University. She has been trained in acceptance and commitment therapy, and Davy works primarily with teenage girls, young adult women, and couples. I really think you're going to enjoy the conversation. Today, we're talking a lot about anxiety in young women and teenagers, and I hope that this is beneficial to you. Again, thanks for being here, and let's dive into this conversation with Davy. Well, we had a little recording snafu, but we're back.
We're back.
So thanks, Davy, for being here.
Yeah.
This is Davy Brenniger. Davy's one of our awesome counselors here at Wellspring, and I'm excited to talk more about a topic that you care a lot about, clients you care a lot about. And I'm really excited for people who may listen to learn more about you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm excited too.
Tell us a little about who you are and kind of the work you do in counseling.
Okay. Well, I moved to Greenville earlier this year. Been practicing counseling for a couple of years now. I have a lot of experience working with young women, like college age, high school aged girls. So that's like definitely a population I have a heart for, and I think just a time of life that can come with its unique challenges.
Yeah.
So I love working with those.
Yeah, you've been a great fit here, and we've heard so many good things about some feedback from your clients or their families.
It's really sweet.
Well, I know we wanted to talk today especially about anxiety that shows up for kind of young women, teenage girls, especially, and would just love to hear kind of how you're making sense of that. I guess tell us a little bit about when one of your teenage kind of girl clients is experiencing a lot of anxiety. How does that begin to appear in the counseling office? How do you begin to kind of notice that?
That's a good question. I think, most parents will, bring their daughter in, and I meet with them first, and sometimes anxiety is a concern of theirs, and ultimately parents usually say, like, I want my daughter to grow in confidence. I think when I'm working, directly with the client, with the teen, there's definitely a lack of self-confidence that kind of prevails, and I think that can really loop itself in with anxiety, because if you don't feel a sense of confidence or a sense of like, I can do this, whether it's presenting on a topic in class or having strong friendships, that lack of confidence in that area can result in a lot of nervousness and anxiety. I
hadn't thought of that before, but it makes a ton of sense that self-confidence would be sort of linked to anxiety. If I don't feel good about myself, I'm not going to feel good in all of these various situations, and so I would be anxious.
Right.
So with teenagers especially, tell us some about the things that the situations of life or the environmental kind of factors that link up to struggles with self-confidence. What are the kinds of things they're facing that impacts their confidence?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things is learning to be more and more independent and separate from your family. So there's, social concerns that can bring a lot of anxiety up with that. especially as you get more like further through high school, like lots of anxieties about maybe moving away from the home for college and, you know, making sure you get into the college that you want, like things like that.
Yeah.
And just kind of this question of like, do I have what it takes to make this transition?
Yeah, it's a huge transition,
Yeah.
obviously. It's hopefully as parents, it's what we're remembering as the point of raising kids, is that they would eventually launch and leave.
Right. Yeah.
But all sorts of hurdles and challenges as you begin to kind of set out on your own.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I'm glad you kind of brought up hopefully as parents, we're like remembering that that's like the long-term goal. Because I think it is hard. It's hard to like let go.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I also think if we're kind of asking the question of like, you know, how do parents support during a time that can be marked by a lot of anxiety for teens?
Right.
I think one of the most counterintuitive ways to support your teen is like more trust, more encouragement, more independence, and like a loosening of that grip.
Counterintuitive, yeah, because if you see someone struggling, are you saying like more of the instinct is to get in there and to help or
Yes.
to bring comfort?
Yes, I think sometimes we all have anxiety, and so sometimes if we're talking from the parent's perspective, like you see your child struggling and your anxiety might tell you to like, okay, I need to come in and hold on and bring close.
Right.
But what that ends up kind of maybe communicating to your teen is that like the answer to their question that they're asking of like, do I have what it takes? That's communicating no in some ways.
It makes a ton of sense when you say it that way. Yeah. If I'm stepping in and I'm your solution, like
right.
You can't figure it out on your own. Which is not what any parent wants to teach their kids.
No.
When we say it out loud.
No, of course not. Right.
Yeah.
But it is, you know, sometimes it's just our fear response.
Right. So that's an interesting thing. You're talking about how everyone has anxiety. We have fear.
Yes.
As parents, aunts, uncles, you know, you love someone who's younger, who's coming through the teen years. You know, you have fear yourself about them.
Yeah.
Something we talked about before, I know offline, is how not all anxiety is necessarily bad.
Yes, that's right.
And it gets confusing in our culture. Certainly, I think it's cool that mental health discussions about anxiety like this are much more common.
Yes, it's important.
But it can be confusing too, because it almost sounds like it's wrong or it's bad to feel anxious at all.
Yes.
Can you talk some about what you mean by the difference between good or bad anxiety?
Yeah. This is a conversation that I have with like every single one of my clients because I agree with you. I love that we're talking more about these things, like kind of in our culture right now. But I think there is kind of a misunderstanding. And I think one of my favorite psychologists kind of likes to say that everybody has anxiety. So like when a client comes to her and says that they're anxious, she says, I mean, like we all have that. Tell me more what you mean by that. And so I think kind of viewing it as more of a spectrum and also maybe switching our language a little bit. Instead of I have anxiety, I'm feeling anxious.
Yeah.
Kind of being able to separate yourself out from that and have it less as a identifying marker and more as like, this is a normal human experience. Like a lot of my clients are like, is this normal? Is this normal? In a lot of ways, yeah. And I think being able to kind of just name that as just a part of the human deal is helpful.
Yes. Yeah. Someone who probably was not being super gracious when he said this, but it stuck with me. He was like, I hear so many teenagers talk about their anxiety or their depression as if it were like a pet of theirs. Sure. My anxiety this, my anxiety that. And maybe we wouldn't say it exactly the same way, but
Yeah.
There's something about that we need to distance ourselves. Like, I'm feeling anxious. I'm experiencing anxiety. That doesn't mean that's who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. Because to me, it's like, if I'm having an experience versus like I have this thing that I can't get rid of, kind of back to the self-confidence piece, like if I'm just experiencing a feeling, like I can move through that and maybe begin to understand like how to cope with that more and what it would be like to resolve that feeling. But if it's this permanent condition, it's like, what's the resolution? Yeah, and how can I get out of it?
What do you do with that?
Right.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I know we've talked about anxiety as like an alarm or like an alarm system.
Yes.
Do you use that metaphor when you talk with clients?
Yeah, a lot. I oftentimes kind of talk with my clients about how, in a lot of ways, like anxiety is actually like a good thing to have. It keeps us safe. I often use the like, if you're driving down the highway and someone swerves and cuts you off, it's your anxiety response, that surge of adrenaline and attention given to your situation that helps protect you in that.
The ability to detect threat, danger quickly.
Yes.
In a millisecond.
And make a plan and a decision about it
and
quickly.
We can take action before we're even like aware of our cognitive kind of process. We're just, we're moved.
Yes.
To respond. Sometimes I've had clients, teenage guy clients, that are so stressed and anxious because it's the day before a test. And I'll start asking, well, tell me about how you've been preparing, or how have you gone about this? And I haven't prepared at all.
Right.
What's it like in class? I don't pay attention.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think you have an anxiety disorder.
Yes.
Like,
exactly. Yeah.
Anyone would feel panicked before a big test that you just haven't prepared for. That just means your alarm system is working. Alerting
you to the threat
at
hand.
Learn from this. Don't do this again.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Like there are, that's another example I use too with folks. Is like, tests, presentations. It's normal to experience some level of anxiety, I think, in those situations. To kind of like examine when is it not normal or bad? Like, when you start to have those sensations or feelings in places or with people that normally are safe and shouldn't be calling for that kind of threat scanning behavior. So
you're kind of actually safe. We can't fully be objective about ourselves, but maybe others would say you're not really in a dangerous situation or a context, and yet you feel like you are.
Yes. Yeah. When you kind of start to feel, that kind of threat response, I need to find my exit ramp, but you're with your friends.
Right.
And, or you're just sitting in class, and not being asked to present or anything. It's normally an easy class for you, but you're feeling that kind of...
You get that feeling.
That surge, yeah.
Yeah, the surge of adrenaline or the
physical component.
Tell us more about, I want to zoom in a little more on anxiety that's common, especially for teenage girls. Like you mentioned, friends and the social world. Can you talk some about that? Obviously, academics is a part of it as well, but... Yeah, for sure. I think with friendship, I think that's just one of the biggest tasks of adolescent development is identity formation, and part of that is like in a social sense of like, who am I as a friend? What does it mean to be a good friend? And this kind of like separating away from the family and spending more and more time with your friends. And I think it can be
it can be very anxiety inducing for different reasons for different girls. Some people, their anxiety does, or that kind of threat response might increase. They feel nervous in social situations. It might be difficult for them to form friendships. Right. Other people, maybe they have a lot of friends, but just the nuances of navigating those relationships and and communicating skillfully and learning to set boundaries, like that can just be very difficult.
All those unwritten rules, yes. Not even sure how to go about it. People are in different places on like a skill spectrum of kind of getting the unwritten social rules. And I'm imagining it is like wondering what people think of me. Is someone negatively evaluating me? That is that's something we care about. Like, I know maybe people will be like, I don't care what people think of me. Yeah. Which is a good aspirational thing, maybe. Sure. Although you probably should in some context.
Yeah. And even that too, I think one of the big questions that like teens are trying to answer for themselves is like, who am I? And so like, even am I the type of person that doesn't care what other people think? Or, deep down, do I really care? And what do I want people to think of me as? And, it's just a huge kind of identity formation time.
Even as you're talking about, I'm hearing you talk a lot about identity, this question of who I am, this task of eventually I'm separating from my family and I'm moving on and I'm becoming an independent person, still a person in relationship, of course, but, being more on my own. Yeah. So there's identity, there's like separating from the family, and then there's the peer relating. Are you saying that the relating to peers is a key way this identity is formed, or this separation can occur? Like navigating the peer relationships is part of how that happens?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think in your early years, like your world is really built out for you by your parents. And I think what starts to happen as you get into like later middle school and high school years, you're venturing out into that world. Right. And relationships are so formational. And so the relationships that begin to really be important and kind of contributing to that sense of identity formation become a little bit more outside of the family. So the friendships, even like teacher relationships at school, things like that. And I think that is really important that it comes at this time, because something that kind of subconsciously starts to happen in this adolescent stage is like, they're already thinking like, if you're 13, you're going to be going away for college at the age of 18. They might not be thinking that actively, but kind of it is this kind of subconscious, like eventually I'm going to be out in the world. Right. And so building confidence through, can I relate to people outside of my family? Like, can I have these relationships and understand myself outside of the home?
As a parent myself, like I think it's easy to forget how much of a key ingredient our children learning how to connect with others outside the family is for their own development as a self, as a person. Right. It's easy to just get lost. You miss the forest for the tree. So it's like, they're just always wanting to talk to their friends, or I don't like those friends, or it feels like they're just they're learning new values, or they're like being influenced in a certain way, different than us as parents would want. Yeah. But it really is important.
Yeah, it is. It's, it makes so much sense that that's difficult as a parent. Right. To, I don't know, it's just hard to let go. And to, maybe be prone to worry about like, well, how are these friends influencing them and things like that. I think that's where the trust component comes in, and is really important when we kind of maybe are thinking about like how do parents kind of support teens as they're doing the thing that they need to do, which is build more confidence in themselves outside of the home, because ultimately that helps with anxiety.
Right.
But yeah, it's by no means like an easy, simple
no, it's
thing
not.
for parents.
And we can, when we slow down and talk about it, it makes sense. This is, but I think, speaking for myself or just talking to lots of other parents, like somehow our expectations get off track and we kind of forget the big picture. And it's good to be reminded about this. I'm interested in, more signs that a teenager might really be struggling with some level of anxiety that's outside kind of the normal limitations. Can you talk a little bit about how you begin to know if this isn't just kind of normal anxiety that everyone faces, but there's really some problems that have developed? Maybe it's, patterns of thinking or ways of like, what do you... what's the signals?
Yeah.
What begins to kind of tell you this is significant?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things I see with clients that are like experiencing anxiety out of the normal ranges is, and maybe one of the first things to look for is like the avoidance piece that comes along with anxiety. When we are experiencing anxiety to such levels that's really uncomfortable, to be honest, we begin to avoid the things that we have identified as causing that.
Right.
So this may look like, if your teen is avoiding, like begins to kind of significantly avoid social interaction with other people, or maybe they're trying to get out of going to school or skip certain classes or things like that, not wanting to leave the house, like avoiding the outside world in general.
Yeah. Just hunkering down and
hunkering down. Yeah. That's a good way to describe it for sure. So I would say that was probably the biggest shift to kind of pay attention to.
Avoidance, kind of behaviors that signal, my child really is avoiding situations that are probably healthy for them.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That are probably healthy for them. Even, there might be part of you that's like, oh, it's kind of nice that they want to stay home all the time or whatever. But, keeping in mind that it's important for them to be out in the world and to be gaining
remembering
this
that big
confidence.
Picture. And
Yes.
It might be. It's like, oh, my teenager wants to hang out with me. So sweet.
Yes.
Which maybe it is.
Yes. Yeah, it can be.
Could be a good moment, right, to cherish. But it could be if it's, a pattern or something, or it's just... Yeah,
or if it's a pattern, or if you sense that it's... if you sense that they're really, like... almost kind of like lingering out of a sense of fear of venturing back out and trying again, and something like that. I think another thing too, like super practical, just like major changes with sleep or appetite. I think anxiety can really, really wreak havoc on those basic kind of needs as well.
We talked about that adrenaline surge.
Yes.
It is a physiological kind of wired-in alarm system. And if it's miscalibrated and it's going off more than maybe it needs to, no surprise that our body is impacted.
Yes.
So sleep, appetite, okay.
Yeah. And teens need a lot of sleep. A lot. So
are you, I know this is a risky question in some ways, but what are the things culturally that you feel like make anxiety worse for teens? Are there any common things that you're identifying in your work with teenagers as like, man, this is like gas on a fire?
Yes, for sure.
I didn't prep you for that question.
No, but it's a good question though. I think, I mean, right now, I think social media is, we're talking about it a lot, and I think that's good and important. Yeah. And I think it's pretty clear at this point that just the more and more unregulated time spent on social media, the worse and worse like mental health and just social health and wellness outcomes you see.
Where are you? You've read Jonathan Haidt's new book, The
Anxious Generation.
Anxious Generation, yeah. Yep. He speaks to a lot of this.
Yes.
That, I guess I'm curious where you're kind of getting that assessment. I agree.
Yeah. I think even just in talking to my clients, noticing on some weeks when, you know, there's a lot to say about stressful situations at school or with friends, oftentimes the kind of like stage on which all of this is playing out is like social media, he said, she said kind of stuff. I think, you know, as teens get older too, just the comparison that kind of comes online with social media, like I think that's something that I see a lot of girls struggling with.
Yeah, the ability to compare ourselves is now, it's so much easier to compare ourselves. It's not just something we have to do mentally.
Yes. Yeah.
Like you can literally just look at pictures and videos and posts.
Well, and I think, as we were talking about earlier, just the importance of building confidence out in the real world and with real relationships, and experiencing risk. Like, when all of your interactions are kind of just like modulated through the screen, that's actually like, of course that is going to increase anxiety. Yeah. Because you're not really out having any experiences. You're just seeing lots of experiences of other people that have been curated and put online. And, you know, and so that's just a lot of time alone looking kind of through the screen. And and so I think, just more time. It's not necessarily social media. I think just like more time online, like not in relationship with other people. Not in real relationship, maybe we would say. I know I have, if you look at it maybe from like an evolutionary kind of lens, probably weren't wired, you know, we haven't evolved, we haven't experienced this kind of interaction. Yes. You know, over the course of thousands and thousands of years. So it's relatively new to learn to interact, and maybe we're not wired up to be able to handle it. Yeah. I mean, just like from maybe a neuroscience perspective, like I've learned just how important face-to-face conversation and interaction is, and like it I don't know, it's just it's hugely important developmentally. Even when we're kind of talking about building confidence with being able to talk to your friends and other adults, and I think just that those embodied relationships are really important. And the more and more we move those online, that's not just for teens, for adults too, like we kind of are going to lose some of that importance there. So well, maybe you're answering this question already, but I'm getting interested, like what tends to help if someone is anxious, if someone is experiencing a lot of alarms going off, feelings of threat and danger, struggle, physiological symptoms, like what are the sorts of things that begin to help? I was wondering maybe more face-to-face Yes.
Experiences would be one, but what else comes up for you when you think about what helps?
Gosh, yeah, more face-to-face experiences across the board, whether that's with a parent or a friend or just a trusted adult. Mm-hmm. I think being able to name what's going on out loud to another person mm-hmm. instead of just, you're having this experience and you're feeling like you're having to press it down and contain it somehow.
Yeah.
I think just putting some words to it actually helps a little bit take that feeling outside and put it in a container outside of you instead of feeling like it's all bottled up.
Makes so much sense. Yeah. Like you said earlier, this is something I'm experiencing. This is a feeling. This isn't me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But naming it, labeling it,
yes,
is something that helps kind of see it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the more or the less we're talking about it, the more it actually feels like this is me. Like I can't, mm-hmm. Can't release this. So, I mean, talking about it, I talk, especially because of how physical anxiety can be. Mm-hmm. I talk a lot with my clients about what it looks like to just to help stress move through your body a little bit. So like going on a walk, going outside, right. Running a little bit, just kind of can help.
It makes tons of sense.
Move through that stress.
Some good strategies to physically kind of work through that stress.
Yeah. I think the other component is definitely mental. So, and that's where it comes back to like being able to talk about what you're experiencing and, realizing like, okay, my mind's kind of on fast forward to like worst case scenario. That's kind of mm-hmm. how anxiety feels mentally sometimes.
Yep.
I think a lot of my clients that struggle with anxiety, ultimately it's like, well, I guess it feels like I'm dying in the moment. And so how do we walk it back and kind of, look at some objective truths and kind of learn to talk to ourselves in a calming manner.
Right. To realize, okay, I'm feeling a certain way. I'm also thinking certain things about this situation that might not be the most accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Or even if it's kind of accurate, maybe it's not the most helpful.
Yeah.
I remember talking with a client, like a young child, about going to the beach, so scared of like sharks in the ocean.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's sharks in the ocean. Sharks in the ocean.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is true,
Sure.
It's not
factual.
It's not
in a sense.
It's a lie. It's just not probably the most helpful thing to say.
Mm.
Okay, so.
Yeah. I think too, like, even asking and really having a conversation of like, okay, what's benefited by, believing that this fear is true. Like, what do you, how is like kind of leaning into that fear serving you?
How's it working?
Yeah. Like with the, to roll with your example of like the little kid, it might be beneficial to not be anywhere near sharks for him. Like, well, if I believe this fear and I don't go in the ocean, then I won't be around sharks. That's true. What else? Like I don't get to swim with my family. Like I don't get to enjoy the beach. Like I kind of almost like a mental pros and cons list.
Counting the cost kind of.
A little bit, yeah.
If I keep going this path with this thought and this avoidance.
Yeah.
Like what else is that bringing?
Yeah. And what really matters to you? Mm. And I think that's kind of where you get back to the identity piece. Like sometimes fear, anxiety has a way of like clouding like what matters to us and what we want to be about and who we are. But slowing down the process and being able to talk about like, like for a teenage girl who is really, really nervous to spend time with friends, mm-hmm. it might feel better maybe initially to avoid going out and to avoid spending time with friends. But ultimately, if we talk more and she like wants to be a person who has friendships and has fun experiences, and if we can tap more into that of what she values, what she wants, I think that has a way of like being able to like override the fear ultimately.
That's really cool to think about.
Yeah.
And those longings for kind of normal developmental stuff, just the stuff of what it, being human's all about.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have connections, or I want to be successful. They're deeper than the fears, if I'm hearing you right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think they are deeper and they're more substantial than the fear.
Yeah.
And so I think some of the work of counseling that I do around anxiety is just like, okay, how, like, this weighs more and actually matters more to you.
Yeah.
And so how do we get you to a place where you're feeling more confident to pursue the things that you really care about?
Yeah. Well, it makes tons of sense. This has been a very fascinating conversation.
Yeah.
And, encouraging too. Helpful, again, as a parent myself. And I know it will be helpful for those who are hearing.
Yeah, I hope so.
Anything else you want to say about, when parents kind of know to seek support or to reach out, or maybe even how the counseling process works?
Yeah. I think, counseling's a great resource. I think, I would always say don't hesitate to reach out if you're worried or if you're noticing some of those things we talked about earlier. I would also say that to maybe not be surprised if some of the concerns you might be having they might be a little bit more connected to your fears and to your anxieties. And so I think when you're looking at a teenager, they're trying to do their thing, they're trying to grow up, and that can be hard on the whole family.
Right.
And so I think making sure that you have a space as a parent to a teen to process. We talked a lot about all the changes and transitions that teens are going through, but it's also a lot for the parent. Like,
that's a good point.
If you do have those concerns and end up reaching out to a counselor or wanting to pursue counseling for your teen, being open to, okay, maybe I have a little bit to work on in terms of like where my anxiety might be at play.
Yeah, that's a really helpful, challenging, kind of convicting, but really helpful thought to remember.
For sure. I think too, I would also like to say just how important parents are to their teens. I think it can feel like my teen doesn't need or want me anymore, and so I have to go out and find her someone else to talk to. And while that can be exactly what your teen needs, I think a parent to a teen is like their most important ally in all of this. And so just knowing above anything else, like your teen needs to know that you love them and that you like them. And if that's all you can really communicate at the end of the day, I think that's more than enough when it comes to parenting a teenager. But yeah, if you're concerned, like counseling is a resource to the whole family. I've seen more and more teens like want to come to counseling and want that space. And I think that's a really good and, a good thing, self-aware thing in a lot of cases. So, listening and trusting them when they say what they're wanting or needing or things like that.
Yeah. It's really helpful.
Sure.
And I think really reassuring for parents to know that you value parents. We as a practice, we value and know parents are so key.
Yes. Big time.
Well, I so appreciate
Yeah.
you making time and talking. Again, such an interesting conversation and needed one.
Yes. Yeah. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
We should do it again.
We will do it again for
Okay.
sure.
Cool. Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah. Thanks, Davey.